There are few things more fascinating in the world of classic muscle cars than stumbling upon a discovery that rewrites a small corner of automotive history. It's not just about the horsepower or the chrome. It's about the stories, the mysteries, the oddities, the one-offs that seem to exist only because someone, somewhere, dared to do something that shouldn't have been possible. That's exactly the kind of story that unfolded when Mark Worman, the Mopar master behind Graveyard Carz, came across what appeared to be a 1969 Plymouth Road Runner wearing an unusual shade of orange in photos posted online. Except, when he saw it in person, something didn't quite add up. Beneath the orange paint, he and his crew began to suspect that this wasn't orange at all. It might actually be pink. And if that were true, it would be one of the most remarkable discoveries in the Mopar restoration world. Mark found the car online, as many classic hunters do these days, while scrolling through Facebook Marketplace. It was presented as a 1969 Road Runner, a model already cemented in the golden age of muscle car lore for its simplicity, affordability, and brutal performance. With its distinctive beep-beep horn and its reputation for being the working man's muscle machine, the Road Runner was one of Plymouth's proudest creations. In the photos, the car glowed in what appeared to be a shade of orange. It wasn't perfect, missing the drivetrain and the fender tag, but for an expert like Mark, that was part of the challenge. The real question was whether the bones of the car were solid enough to warrant a resurrection. So, Mark made a call to the owner, and before long, he and his right-hand man, the ever-colorful cousin Dougie, were on the road for a 2-hour drive to check out the car in person. What they found when they arrived wasn't quite what they expected. Sure, the body was rough, the paint was uneven, and the interior was cluttered like a forgotten storage unit. But there was something about the color, something unusual peeking through the wear and tear. As the sunlight hit the floor panels inside the cabin, they caught a faint glimpse of a hue that number 1969 Plymouth should ever have worn. Pink. Pink. On a 1969 Road Runner. That was impossible. Or was it? To understand the magnitude of this discovery, you have to remember the context of 1970. Plymouth introduced a set of high-impact colors for that model year, wild, vibrant shades that screamed for attention and became icons in their own right. Among them was Moulin Rouge, a bold, candy-like pink known internally as FM3. It was an audacious choice, and buyers either loved it or hated it. Dodge, the sister brand, offered the same hue under the name Panther Pink. Both appeared for the first time in 1970, never before. So, to find a 1969 Road Runner painted pink raised an eyebrow. Maybe two. At first glance, Mark suspected it might just be an overpaint job. Cars that have lived half a century often go through several changes in color, especially if they've spent years passing from one owner to another. But the more he and Dougie looked, the more the mystery deepened. The VIN plate was attached to the windshield frame using standard commercial rivets instead of factory-issued rosette rivets. A small but telling detail that made any Mopar expert's stomach tighten. It meant that someone, at some point, had tampered with it. That didn't necessarily mean foul play, but it did mean that the car's identity might not be as straightforward as it appeared. And the missing fender tag didn't help. The fender tag, usually mounted under the hood, holds a car's original build information, engine code, transmission type, color, trim, options. Without it, verifying originality becomes a forensic exercise. Still, Mark wasn't ready to give up. He had spent years breathing life back into forgotten Mopars, and a missing tag was hardly a deal-breaker. What mattered now was finding out whether this orange-painted, pink-hearted Road Runner was genuinely born that way, or if it was a mashup of mismatched parts. As they peered closer into the car's nooks and crannies, Dougie pointed out that the floor pan under the faded carpeting was indeed pink. Not primer, not rust-colored steel, but actual pink paint. It was the kind of moment that sends a shiver down the spine of any restorer. Could this truly be a pre-1970 Road Runner painted in Moulin Rouge? The timeline didn't fit, but maybe the story did. There were cases, albeit rare, of Chrysler approving special order paint codes before an official colors release. For customers with deep pockets or unique requests, the company would assign a $999 paint code and mix up whatever shade they wanted, at a premium cost. These cars are exceedingly rare and often undocumented, making them the holy grail for collectors. Could this be one of those special orders? A 1969 Road Runner painted pink by request? The idea was tantalizing. To get answers, Dougie did what every backyard restorer has done at least once in his life. He took out a blade. It wasn't exactly a precision instrument, more like a homemade shank, but it would do the job. Carefully, he scraped away a section of the top orange paint, revealing the color beneath. And there it was, bright, unmistakable, unapologetically pink. "That is pink," Mark exclaimed, half in disbelief. Pink as bubble gum. For a moment, the two men just stood there, staring at it. The car that shouldn't exist did exist, right in front of them. But there was another twist waiting for them. When they popped open the trunk, the inner surfaces were orange. That didn't make sense. How could one part of the car be pink and another orange? The first thought that came to mind was that this might be a Frankenstein car, two separate Road Runners welded together at some point in their long history. It wouldn't be the first time someone had pieced together two wrecked cars to create one usable one. But once again, the evidence didn't support that theory. The VIN stamped inside the trunk matched the one on the dashboard. Whatever was going on, it was all one car. Next, they checked the radiator support numbers, another key identifier used by Mopar experts to confirm authenticity. The numbers matched across the board: dashboard, trunk, and radiator support. This wasn't a fake. This was a genuine 1969 Plymouth Road Runner. The mystery deepened even further. How, then, did this car end up wearing a color that shouldn't have existed for another year? Under the hood, things were as bare as a skeleton. The engine and transmission were gone, leaving only the empty mounts and traces of where a V8 once lived. Manual steering, manual drum brakes, and a sway bar told Mark that it was likely a lower option car originally. But that hardly mattered. The intrigue was in its paint, its past, and the story that it carried. Mark decided then and there that the car was coming home with them. They loaded it onto the trailer, the pink floor gleaming faintly beneath the dull orange exterior, and set off back to Graveyard Carz HQ. Along the way, Mark and Dougie couldn't stop speculating. Maybe it had been a Chrysler test mule. Maybe it was a dealership demo car repainted before official release. Or maybe it was, against all odds, one of those mythical 999 special orders that slipped through the cracks before the 1970 high-impact palette became official. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. This Road Runner had a story unlike any other. Back at the shop, Mark began researching. He dug through old Chrysler documentation, special order records, paint charts, and restoration databases. The color FM3 didn't officially appear until January 1970, but some whispers among Mopar historians hinted that prototypes or early samples of the paint might have been used internally during late 1969 production runs. If that were the case, this Road Runner could very well be one of the earliest examples ever sprayed in the iconic pink hue. As the restoration planning began, the debate wasn't whether to restore it, but how. Should they keep the orange repaint to preserve its as-found look, or strip it down to reveal and restore its original pink glory? For Mark, the decision was obvious. This car deserved to shine in the color it was born with, or at least the one it first wore. The pink was part of its identity now, and bringing it back would be a tribute not only to the car itself but to the spirit of Mopar experimentation that defined the era. The work ahead wouldn't be easy. Finding period-correct parts for a 1969 Road Runner is challenging enough, but restoring a one-off pink example requires an extra level of precision. The drivetrain had to be sourced, most likely a 383 or 440, depending on how the car was originally equipped, and every mechanical component would need to be refurbished or replaced. The body would undergo a full strip and repaint, every trace of the orange overcoat removed, replaced by the proper FM3 style pink. It would be both a resurrection and a celebration. In the world of classic car restoration, stories like this fuel the passion that keeps garages lit late into the night. They remind us that beneath every layer of paint, there's history, sometimes surprising, sometimes contradictory, but always worth uncovering. For Mark and his team, this wasn't just about flipping another car for profit. It was about uncovering a forgotten piece of Mopar history and giving it the recognition it deserved. Once completed, the pink Road Runner would no doubt turn heads at every show and gathering it attended. It would be the kind of car that starts conversations, sparks debates, and makes people question what they thought they knew about Plymouth's color history. And perhaps that's the best part of the story. The mystery will never be completely solved. Maybe it was a special order. Maybe it was a factory experiment. Or maybe, just maybe, it was built by someone who loved the color pink enough to bend the rules. Either way, the 1969 pink Plymouth Road Runner stands as a symbol of the unpredictable beauty of the classic car world. Decades later, enthusiasts like Mark Worman continue to chase these stories, not for fame or fortune, but for the thrill of discovery, the satisfaction of peeling back the layers of time to find something that shouldn't exist, and yet somehow, gloriously does. And in that dusty garage, under the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint scent of old gasoline, a forgotten Road Runner has found its way back into the spotlight, its pink heart beating once more. In the weeks that followed, the pink Road Runner slowly began its transformation at graveyard Carz. The orange paint, stubborn and uneven, was stripped layer by layer until the factory panels beneath began to breathe again. Every inch of the body told a different story. Small repairs from decades past, patches of primer from forgotten resprays, and, most importantly, broad surfaces that still shimmered faintly in the unmistakable pink that had sparked this entire adventure. It was a reminder that no matter how much time passes, the truth always lingers beneath the surface. Mark worked with his team to carefully catalog every detail. Each panel, each number, each marking was photographed and logged. Restoring a car like this isn't just a job. It's detective work mixed with craftsmanship. They traced the car's ownership history, found fragments of old registrations, and even managed to track down a previous owner who vaguely remembered the car being a strange pink color sometime in the early 1980s. It wasn't proof, but it was a clue. Another small piece of a puzzle that had refused to stay buried. As the bodywork progressed, the engine question loomed. What heart should this resurrected Road Runner receive? There was no original engine, and without the fender tag, there was no definitive answer. Mark decided that if the car was going to be reborn as something extraordinary, it deserved an engine worthy of its uniqueness. A correct era 440 cubic inch V8 was chosen, strong, loud, and faithful to the muscle spirit of 1969. It would make the car roar again, the way Plymouth engineers had intended more than half a century ago. When the body finally received its first coats of fresh FM3 pink paint, the shop fell silent for a moment. Under the lights, the color seemed alive, bold yet oddly elegant, a relic of the 1970s fearless approach to automotive personality. It was hard not to smile. There was something joyful about seeing a muscle car, a machine built for power and rebellion, wearing pink like a badge of pride. It defied expectations then, and it still does now. The car had gone from a mystery to a masterpiece. During the final assembly, as trim pieces, badges, and chrome were reinstalled, Mark reflected on how cars like this represent something bigger than just steel and paint. They tell stories about the people who built them, the ones who owned them, and the enthusiasts who refused to let them die. Every dent and scratch was a chapter. Every discovery, a revelation. This Road Runner had lived many lives. Raced, repainted, forgotten, rediscovered, and now reborn. It carried all those memories in its new coat of pink. Once completed, the car gleamed under the shop lights, a perfect fusion of restoration skill and mystery preserved. The pink Road Runner wasn't just another project checked off the list. It was a statement. It proved that history still hides surprises, even after decades of documentation and debate. It also reinforced something deeply human about the hobby. The need to keep searching, to uncover the truth, to breathe life into what others might call impossible. At its debut, when the restored car finally rolled into the sunlight, it drew a small crowd. Even seasoned Mopar fans stopped to admire the color. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others smiled knowingly. A few whispered theories, maybe it was an early experimental paint batch, maybe a dealer demo. But no matter what anyone believed, they all agreed on one thing. It was stunning. The pink shimmered and danced across the body lines, making the muscular curves of the Road Runner stand out in a way no other shade could. Mark knew the car's next step would be finding a new home. The plan was to list it for sale, but not just as a restored Road Runner. It would be offered as a piece of automotive history, accompanied by documentation, photos of the restoration process, and a detailed report of everything discovered. Whoever bought it wouldn't just be getting a car. They'd be inheriting a legend, a tangible connection to an era when colors were loud, engines were raw, and imagination had no boundaries. In the quiet after the work was done, Mark often found himself walking past the car long after the cameras stopped rolling and the team had gone home. He'd run his hand across the smooth pink surface, thinking about how strange it was that a color could spark so much curiosity. The Road Runner had started as a simple Facebook find, another half-lost project car in a sea of forgotten metal. But it had become something else entirely, a reminder that sometimes the rarest treasures are the ones that weren't supposed to exist. And maybe that's the beauty of the muscle car era itself. It wasn't perfect. It was messy, experimental, bold, and full of contradictions. The people who built these cars weren't thinking about collectors 50 years later. They were building machines that thrilled people in the moment. Every once in a while, one slips through time carrying something unusual, something that doesn't fit the records but fits perfectly in the mythology of the open road. So, the pink 1969 Plymouth Road Runner lives again, not just as a car, but as a story. A story about curiosity, persistence, and the joy of discovery. It's proof that history is never really finished being written, that under every layer of paint there might be a secret waiting to be revealed. For now, it sits proudly among other restored legends at Graveyard Carz, a splash of color among the black, green, and blue muscle icons. A reminder that even in a world built on horsepower and steel, there's still room for a little mystery and a lot of pink.